Hi, my name is Sherry Judd and I am from Maine. And I went into what they called ILC, International Logging Corporation, back when I graduated from high school. And what that company was dealing with the Canadian truck drivers that brought wood into the mills. I worked for Woodlands Department, and ILC was part of that. At ILC. I had to take a French lesson so I could talk with truck drivers because no one could speak French. Um, from there, I went into the Woodlands Department, and in that department, I became secretary to Win Dyke, head of the audit department. Then I became a storeroom clerk under his son, Peter Dyke. And then from Otis, I went upstairs in the office in the Otis mill. And then I left there in 1972 and went to work at the Androscoggin Mill. And at the Androscoggin Mill, I was secretary. I also was a switchboard operator, and back then we had, probably 40 or so, maybe more, plugins to a switchboard. And that was my funnest job. And then after that, I went into the purchasing department. I worked in the billing department. I worked as secretary to Paul Washburn, who was one of the supervisors there. I worked as a mill manager's secretary at one point, and then when I left Androscoggin to raise my family, I came back and went to work for number 4 paper machine project. So they were installing number 4. I became the office manager on that job, and my first task was to haul in 12 to 24 trailers within 2 weeks for the people that were working on the construction of the number 4 paper machine. Got it done, so I had my job. So from there, I went back into the mill and worked for the communications department with Patty Richards. And then from there, they built a high-tech power plant up behind the mill, and I was hired to go up there and be the administrative assistant up there, and HR assistant. So that's my career in the paper mill. I left Calpine, the power plant, left that in about 2000, because they went through bankruptcy. It was a California company, and they didn't know how to deal with the winters up here, so they went through bankruptcy, and at that point, Androscoggin Mill bought the power plant and is running it today. And so I had to have another job really quick because my husband at the time was on my insurance. So I went from the state of Maine to the Department of Corrections and dealt with juveniles. And again, another one of my favorite jobs. And to this day, I do juvenile services here at the museum. We started looking for history on the paper industry in about 2003. We had a luncheon and asked some governors, legislators to join us, and asked if they'd support a museum. And everyone was glad to see that we were interested enough to hold the history. So me and this other girl started looking around we actually was able to use an organization that had a train, a caboose, and the caboose was on wheels, and they showed videos to kids who were willing to come in on how not to jump on trains, because back then there was a lot of kids jumping trains and losing their legs and stuff. So they asked me if I promised to video that during all these sessions, that they would take me any place I wanted to go and let me get in some artifacts in that caboose. And so whenever there was an industrial park rally, we would go to the different industrial parks or fairs or whatever on wheels, and we would advertise about the mills, and we'd advertise about paper making and tell our stories, and people would start bringing in artifacts, and we were storing them everywhere, and everybody's barn, cellar, and my house was full. So we started looking for a place, and at that point, I had written a letter to International Paper Company, because this at the time was being used as Woodlands offices, and they were getting ready to move Woodlands. So they had it on the market, and I wrote a letter to Mike Lesko and didn't hear back from him. And then we got in touch with one of the guys that at one time was up here at the Androscoggin Mill, who worked for Mike Lesko. And his name was Dave Lieberman, and he was a history buff and talked Newland Lesko into giving us this house. And the only way we found out we had this house was we called the real estate office to ask about different sizes in this house, like how big it is, the square footage and stuff, because we were kind of interested in what it looked like inside. And they was really mad at us. And we said, why are you so upset with us? They said, well, we just lost this house on the market. They gave it to you. We didn't even know it. So that was a really good day. It was a really good day. And ever since then, we've been collecting artifacts. And I traveled with the train for 2.5 years, advertising what we were doing here and trying to gain support. And we did get donations. We got donations, and now, every once in a while, we'll get a donation from some of the surrounding towns to help us out a little bit. But yeah, it's a big building to take care of. But it was the Record family house, and he was actually the first family in the state in this area that started the first pulp mill, and he started a leatherboard mill as well. And he was the one that had this house built, Alvin Record, and his father Judson. And later on, when Bill Murray came to be the first manager of the mill here, he bought this house from the Record family, and later on Bill Murray sold it to the International Paper Company. And then they had the mill managers living here with their families whenever they were here. So that's kind of the story of my background and how this all got started here at the museum. I've never liked history, but I started in with this history, and it was just something dear to me because I worked in the environment, and I really enjoyed it and enjoyed the people in it, and that's why I decided to run with it. Darrell Brown was one of our chamber presidents at the time that we started all this, and we had a speaker from Bethel, Maine, and he said, I don't know if you people realize the history you have here, but somebody needs to capture it. And that the president, which was Darrell Brown at the time, said to us, me and this other girl, you girls can do this? We said, we'll give it a try. But she got sick later and had to leave. But it was a long haul, but it was worth every bit of it. I would work here till midnight very often until we opened by myself. Wouldn't do that today, but I did then and enjoyed every bit of it. The era that was in the mill, like the fathers and the grandfathers, this is something very valuable that kids today need to understand and learn what their grandfathers did, or their fathers or their mothers in the mill. It's a very valuable lesson on how to make paper, because that's going to be the thing of the past. And someday you're going to say, how did they do that? So it's really good that we have preserved this so that that era back then comes forward in their grandchildren. And this is here for them to enjoy. The mill's an important thing with these surrounding communities. I mean, Hugh J. Chisholm, who bought Record's mills out and later became the president of International Paper Company, he built all the churches and the schools in these areas. And he really, the mills is what made these communities. I mean, the immigrants were coming in through Ellis Island and Canada, New Brunswick, Finland, Germany. They were all coming here and working, and that's what built all of our communities around here. And it just bloomed in the 70s. It just bloomed everywhere. New businesses, and the families were affordable with college, and I mean, it was just a huge era. And then, along came technology, and it kind of hurt the industry, which isn't, it wasn't a bad thing that we had technology, but it was paperless, and it did hurt the mills. Well, I understand right now the future of some paper industries is in the diaper industry, making the linings in the diapers and in the pens, things like that, because the baby boomers are probably going to use a lot of those. So that, I understand, is one way they're going. I'm not sure how many mills do that, convert, because it costs a lot of money to convert a mill. But that's one of the places it's going. Not sure about the rest. When I worked for Woodlands Department, they had, a lot of forestry up north in Maine, Ashland, Clayton Lake, and they would sell permits to the employees who would want to go fishing and hunting up there. You had to get your permit, and I was one of the clerks who gave out those permits. And they'd go up there, and they worked off what they call the Golden Road, which was a place where you always saw moose and deer and all kinds of wildlife. It was very beautiful up there. And so the employees really took advantage of that. And it wasn't just the employees, I understand. There was other people that could go. And there was a small fee for that. So that was one of the things that the mills did that people really enjoyed. The Androscoggin Mill up here in Jay let Androscoggin Land Trust manage most of its land now. And they have, made river walks and walking trails. They've made trails to hike on and bike on. And so that's been really nice to have something like that in the community that we can offer other people. So the mills have been really good about their land and letting us use it and whatnot. I mean, I can remember working at the Otis Mill and having to go down. I worked in the storeroom for Peter Dyke and having to go down in what they called the dungeon. And in the dungeon was like in the basement. We had to go clean out sections of it sometimes so we could have storage. And I remember going in there and seeing these big rats, and it was really dark in there. It was scary, And I think I went in there maybe twice, and that was it. I wouldn't go back down. So it was things like that was kind of fun. The people in Otis Mill were really good to work with. It was like a family. Everybody knew each other, took care of each other, and watched each other's back, And when I went up to the Androscoggin, a little bit of that was lost. It was more people from out of town that we really didn't know, where Otis was mostly local people. But, it was, again, good to me and my family. I enjoyed working there, and I think I got done for the second time. First time I got done to have children and raise my children, they called me back because someone was out sick, and a year later I had to quit again. So, but then I went back to work after the kids got in school. But yeah, I enjoyed it, and the paper industry's been good to us, been good to the area. No complaints there. The strike was really hard, but my children learned a lot from that strike. I mean, we were making good money in the mill, and my kids didn't lack for anything. And when the strike came, they learned to appreciate what they had already and what, they couldn't have in the future. But it was a good lesson for my children anyway. They learned a little bit more about budgeting. I'd take them in the grocery store and say, this is what you buy instead of this. So it was nice, and we had different recipes that we would not have normally eaten, hamburger stew or something like that. So they learned things, how to cook economically, and things are still good for them, So it was even though it was a sad time, it was a growing time. We all grew from that, and I think that's all in the past now. I actually was in college at 35 years old, and the strike happened, and I went back to school so I could get a job because he didn't have one. So yeah, I think it was 1987 that I graduated from college and took a job at a place that called Industrial Products in North Jay, and they furnished pipes, valves, and fittings for the mill. So I would take in jobs and bid on them, and I did bidding and sent it back to the mill. And we had a lot of we grew fast and moved to Bangor to a bigger area. Yeah, so that was another job I had that was kind of associated to the mill. Yeah.